What's up, guys? Welcome back. We're already ready for our first video. This is our second video. First official video. You already saw the intro, it doesn't matter. We're back. We're going to start our first part of a 3-part series today. It's going to be all about breeding crested geckos. So the first video, which is today, is going to be all about breeding them. So everywhere from picking out the right gecko, how to pick them, how to set up a tank to breed them, how to introduce them, all that type of thing. The second video will be about how to hatch the eggs and how to get the eggs prepped and what to do once the female lays the eggs, how to tell if the eggs are fertile, things like that. And then the third video is going to be about how to take care of the hatchlings. Now, I haven't really seen this done before. I was trying to look up different videos and things like that to see what was out there. I haven't seen as much info that I'm going to give you in all of the other research that I've done previously. A lot of the info that I'm going to give is a lot of tips and tricks and basically everything you're going to end up needing to know about crested geckos relative to breeding. Now, as a disclaimer, real quick before we get started, I'm not condoning breeding crested geckos for profit or anything like that. This is just basically a care guide on how to do it if you are going to do it, or if you're going to do it in a responsible way and you can take care of all of the pets that you do own or that you're planning on owning by breeding in the future. So first we're going to talk about how to pick your geckos. So to get started, you're going to need a male and a female crested gecko, obviously. The way you tell the difference between a male and a female is that males will have little pores underneath their legs that you can see. They also will have a little bump right above their tail. What you're looking for basically is going to be a healthy crested gecko. So basically nothing too skinny. You want to make sure that there's no weird poops in there or anything like that. There's no discharge coming out of like the eyes or the nose. That there's no stuck shed. Things like that. Anything like obviously wrong with it that you can tell. Alright, so you guys know Squash. This is my Harlequin crested gecko. She's typically not this crazy, but it is nighttime right now. So she's a little bit crazy because she's out and trying to climb everywhere. But this is what a healthy crested gecko female looks like. No stuck shed issues or anything like that. Wow, she's really crazy today. Really pretty, looks very nice. No discharge around the eyes, nothing around the nostrils or anything like that. No stuck shed, very pretty. Somewhat flaring, not fully flared right now, unfortunately. But she's normally not this crazy. Normally she's just like this and will stay in my hand all day. So yeah, basically what you're going to want to do is look for a healthy pair. I would prefer, honestly, if you went to a reputable breeder. That way you know the genetics are healthy and you can actually get some good bloodlines. That way you're not going to be inhumanely breeding the geckos. But that's just my personal preference. A lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you is my personal preference. There's a lot of times you can do different things, but I'm just going to give you what works best for me and what I've done in the past and what I think is humane and good for them. Alright, so I put Squash back, so now we can keep on moving. So the next thing you're going to want to do is get some supplies. One of the first supplies you're going to want to get, especially if you're breeding, and honestly if you're just keeping crested geckos in general, I think it's appropriate, and I think it's part of being a responsible owner to have a scale. That way you can monitor their weight, make sure they're healthy, make sure if they are losing weight, you see it ahead of time. That way you don't catch it too late and you have something unfortunate happening to your crested gecko. You also want to get an egg laying box and then some substrate for that egg laying box. So basically the egg laying boxes that I use are little critter keepers that have a little bit of moss in it. Probably at least 3/4 to probably 80% of the entire little critter keeper is going to be filled with moss. And then I dampen it every day. I do give it the chance to dry out though. Throughout the day, just to make sure that no mold or anything like that grows on it. But if you spray it like once a day, I usually spray it at nighttime before I shut off lights. I spray it down so it's a little bit moist and wet. That way, if they're having any suck shed problems or when they lay the eggs, they're going to lay them right in there for you, so you know exactly where they are. You can quickly just grab that out, move the moss, and then you'll find the eggs. And while you are getting those little critter keepers, you might as well get 2 or 3 extra for when the babies hatch, because that's what you're going to end up putting them in. I usually use the very small ones. I don't know the exact measurements off the top of my head. I will get those for you guys though. So yeah, all in all, depending on how many females you have, I would get 2 or 3 probably. Usually you can keep females together, but I like to avoid all of that extra stress. It's also important to remember that when you are breeding crested geckos, you cannot have the male and female together year round. So you are going to want to get a separate enclosure for him, obviously. All right, so the next topic, when are you actually going to start breeding now that you have your geckos? So basically the crested gecko breeding cycle goes from March to September. So it's about 8 or 9 months that they generally have a natural breeding cycle that their instincts just kick in, and that's generally when females will be laying eggs. You also have to make sure your crested geckos are old enough and they weigh enough. Now, females generally need to be 18 plus months old, and you generally want them to be at least 35 to 40 grams in weight. That's why another reason it's important to have your scale for them is so you will know if they're actually of weight and you can monitor their weight, like I said in the past. Another important thing to remember with the females is that before you do start breeding them, once they are the healthy weight, that you should also start giving them a lot of extra calcium. When they're creating all the eggs, they are going to need to use some extra calcium. That way, when they do lay the eggs, they are nice and healthy and calcified. So basically, you can just go and give them a couple extra crickets that are dusted with calcium, and that should be fine. You also could put a little bit of calcium on top of their Pangea. That's what I typically do. I just add a little bit of extra calcium to Pangea since it already has calcium and vitamins and things like that. I just go a little bit above and beyond and put a little bit in just to make sure they have more than enough for breeding purposes and that they stay healthy. So for males to be ready, they need to be at least 35 grams too, and you want to make sure they're close to the same size as the female. You really don't want to put 2 different size geckos together because one could be aggressive towards the other one, whether it's male or female. But you just want to make sure that they're close to the same size so that nothing bad could potentially happen. All right, so now we're going to get into how to actually breed the crested geckos. So you always want to take the male and put him into the female's enclosure. If you do it the other way around, the male will be way too aggressive for the female. So you want to make sure that you always put the male into the female's enclosure so she stays comfortable and she's not stressed. When you put the male into the female's enclosure, you want to make sure that you watch and that they're not being too aggressive. Now, sometimes a little bit of biting is normal and common, unfortunately. It shouldn't be very bad though. Most of that is going to happen generally when they actually start breeding. So if you see that they're going at it, you want to get them separated as fast as possible because you don't want any injuries. Males are typically very aggressive, much more than female crested geckos would be. So you want to watch out for the males generally. And now that can differ every once in a while. You'll get an aggressive female and a not aggressive male. But generally speaking, the males are much more aggressive than the females. So that's also why you put them into the female's enclosure. So basically what to look for when you do start breeding them, typically is like the male chasing the female, biting the back of her neck. Sometimes that can cause cuts and things like that, so you want to watch out for that. That is common. You just want to make sure that she's not getting too cut up, and as soon as the breeding is over, you're going to have to separate the male and the female so she can heal. You're also going to want to look for like weird noises they would be making. Sometimes when they are biting, they make weird noises, or they just make weird noises in general. That's all normal. All these things, biting of the back of the neck, kind of the male chasing the female, all these things are normal. It's what's supposed to happen. It's what does happen in most cases. I actually, in one of my crested gecko pair that I used to have, I actually kept them together in a tank for the majority of the year because they were very gentle breeders, and my male didn't really bite my female at all. It was very gentle, and it was very nice to actually be able to keep them together because they would sleep together in their little coconut. They would just be hanging out in their enclosure for all the time. I kept them in there for probably 8 or 9 months out of the year. That way I could give the female a break just from breeding, just to give her body a break. Not that the male was being aggressive or anything like that, but it was just to make sure that she got alone time and didn't have a male to worry about at all. It is important to notice that if your female does get injured, separate them, let her heal, and then you can try again always in the future. You don't want your female to get injured and then get sick, or for that cut, if she gets a cut in her back of her neck, to get infected or anything like that. So always be cautious and always take the female and the male away if you do start to see injuries like that, because that is not normal, and that's something you kind of want to avoid completely. So it's better to just separate them, address her wound, clean it, and then you can always try again in the future when she's healed, because usually it'll go better the second time. And if not, separate them, try it again, try it a third time, and then maybe if that doesn't work, you can switch out the male or switch out the female, whatever you think might be the problem, and then that might work. So you never know. Now, generally the breeding will start within a few hours after you put the male in with the female in her tank. So you can expect to hear noises and start seeing stuff usually within a couple hours after you put them in together. I personally recommend, if you can't keep them together for an extended period of time, usually like a week at a time should be good enough to get the female pregnant. That way you can ensure that they're going to breed multiple times. That way you can almost ensure that you're going to have fertile crested gecko eggs. And now this was, like I was saying, another controversial topic is whether you should leave them together or not. Now, like I was saying, I had a pair of crested geckos that I left together for 8 or 9 months out of the year because my male was not aggressive with my female whatsoever. My male crested gecko never bit her or did anything like that. He was very gentle, so there was never any marks or cuts or any injuries I had to worry about. So that's why I kept them together. And sometimes that is okay if you can leave them together and you can tell that the female's not stressed and she's doesn't have any cuts or any wounds or anything like that, then you can leave them together for a little bit longer. You still want to give her a few months out of the year where she is alone. That way she can heal and be totally fine on her own, just in case there is any stress that you can't visibly see or that you wouldn't be seeing in normal times, because they are nocturnal. So when they do most of anything that they're doing, they do it at nighttime for the most part. But there are other cases where you cannot leave the male and the female together. Now, Squash and my male, I could not leave together because they would go kind of after each other, but they did breed and they were chill for the most part. I just couldn't leave them in there 24 hours a day all the time like I could the other pair. Like I said, you know, it's just kind of case by case, and it's kind of, you got to know as the owner what you should do based on how your geckos are reacting. Alright, so now I'm going to tell you how you can tell if a female is gravid. Gravid basically just means that the female is carrying eggs. The first thing you're going to notice on your crested gecko is that she's going to get a little bit plumper when she is gravid. That's one of the key ways to tell, actually, that she is. You should notice her weight go up a little bit. You should notice she's getting a little bit chubbier, a little bit thicker. That's all normal. That just means that she's carrying the eggs. It can be tricky to see this at first. That's why it is important to have a scale. Now, the other thing that I recommend is, with that, once you know that the female is gravid, you don't really want to be handling her at all unless you absolutely have to. And then still, I don't ever handle my females when they're gravid. I don't want any complications or anything like that to go wrong or to stress them out in any way at all. So generally, if I have to do anything with the tank, I wait until they're in their coconut, and then I just quickly, if I need to replace substrate or whatever I need to do, I just quickly do that when they're in their coconut and try to be as quiet and as fast as I can. That way I don't stress them out. You're also going to notice that the females will start hiding a lot more often, and they're also going to start eating a lot more food. All these things are normal. It just means that she's gravid and that she's going through pregnancy. So don't be alarmed if you don't see her as often. That is totally normal. Don't be stressed. Don't be worried. Honestly, it wouldn't even hurt if you gave her a little bit more food, because like I said, she will eat more food. So it's better if you do put extra food in and, let's say, just waste a little bit. That way you make sure she's getting enough food. And then, like I said, also make sure you sprinkle a little bit of calcium on top. I usually use Pangea. I think that is one of the best foods you can get for crested geckos. Huge variety. Usually make it a little, for a week at a time, because it can usually last in the fridge for about a week. I just take a little Tupperware container, like a little circle. I put a little bit of water in, and then I just add a little bit of the crested gecko foods. I usually do like 2 at a time, and then I mix it up every single week when I do it, just to make sure. So sometimes some crested geckos are a little bit picky, so you want to make sure that you do change it up a little bit, so you're giving them a variety. And like I said, just to hit it home, you do not want to handle your females when they are gravid. You don't want any stress to them. You want to make sure that everything that you can do to make sure that their pregnancy goes well. You don't want any complications like that, because that is such a pain and it could potentially kill your crested gecko. So you don't want anything like that to happen. So basically, crested geckos, once they mate, they will start laying eggs every 30 days or so. And by start laying eggs, I mean laying fertile eggs, not actual eggs, because they will lay around whether there's a male there or not, kind of like a chicken or like a duck would. They just won't be fertile eggs, so nothing would hatch out of your eggs, obviously. Alright guys, that's it for today. Be looking out for our second video. The second video in this 3-part series is going to be all about how to hatch the eggs. So how to incubate the eggs and then how to hatch the eggs. So be looking for that. That'll be dropping next week. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned, because we've got a lot of stuff upcoming and I'm excited. So thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.